Have you heard of the safe withdrawal rate? This is a rule of thumb that helps retirees know how much they can safely take from their retirement portfolio. In today's episode, Mark and I will talk about where this rule came from, whether it's still relevant in today's environment, and how you can use it to help with your retirement planning.
It's easy to get lost on the way to retirement. Things like taxes, improper planning, and excessive market risk can all lead you astray from your goal of a successful and happy retirement. That's where Liz Whittaberry comes in. She's a holistic financial advisor and the founder of Best Path Advisors, and she can help guide you to a better financial path. This is Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry.
Hey everybody, welcome into Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry and myself here to talk about this conversation when it comes to the rule of thumb or just the general withdrawal rate conversation. What's a good rate, especially in 2024? So we'll certainly talk about that this week here on the podcast. As always, if you need help, please, before you take any action, talk, especially with something like this, talk with a qualified professional like Liz, who is a financial advisor and the founder at Best Path Advisors. And you can find her online at bestpathadvisors.com. That's bestpathadvisors.com. Liz, how are you? What's going on?
I am very good. And what's going on is that it's now spring and our grass is looking great and flowers are starting to come in. So I love that.
And right where I'm at the last week, it rains every single day and I'm getting tired of it.
It did here too. It did here
like,
too. You may have heard about that. But
yes, that's true. We did. You okay in that area?
Looking good.
In your area, everything okay?
Yeah, we didn't get too much. We live in a part of the state that it seems to go north or south of us. So
okay.
We're very fortunate that way. But
Gotcha.
there were certainly areas of Texas that got hit with all of the heavy storms. And it is that time of year where we do have those heavy storms. And so I feel for the people that have to do the repairs and, kind of put things back together. So
Indeed.
hope that goes smooth for them.
Yeah. Mother Nature, she has a way of doing things, that's for sure. So best wishes to all those folks out there with that. So let's talk a little bit about these withdrawal rates, Liz. We'll probably touch, I guess, is it fair to call this the 4% rule conversation? Because it typically seems to be where it comes back around to, right? So with that said, does it still make sense today? Is the 4% safe withdrawal rate, excuse my voice a little bit, obviously it's kicking out. Does it still make sense in today's environment?
I think it is always good to have a rule of thumb as a starting point when you're trying to simplify what you're thinking about, but you have to understand where it came from, what it means. You can't just use a safe withdrawal rate number as the gospel for everybody.
Right.
That's not what it was intended to be.
And it's an older rule too, correct?
It is. Yeah. It originally came about a fellow by the name of Bill Bengen, who was a financial advisor. Now before he became an advisor, he had studied, I think it was aerospace engineering or something, complicated like that. So very intelligent man, was working as a financial advisor to help people retire and trying to figure out, well, how much can I tell them that they can take from their portfolios? So he did a lot of research and in 1994 published his study in the Financial Planning Association Journal. And you can still go out and read it. You can Google it. You can download that article and read it. What he decided was that, if somebody is in 50% stocks, 50% bonds, then let me show you how many years your portfolio would last at a certain withdrawal rate. And he used historical returns beginning back in 1926 and going forward to test this theory.
Right.
He always adjusted the withdrawal for real inflation that happened at that point in time. So at 3%, it would last more than 50 years. A 4% withdrawal would last 35 plus years. A 5% withdrawal would last 20 years or more. And a 6% withdrawal rate could be less than 20 years. And so that's why he settled in on 4%.
Right.
Because
35
he figured
years.
Nobody's going to live 50 years in retirement, but
Right.
You certainly might live more than 20. So to be safe, 4% would be a good starting point.
Yeah. And you said that was a 50-50 portfolio, correct?
It was 50% stocks,
yeah.
50% bonds.
Now,
Yes.
that was also, completely different, again, what we faced even just the last number of years. could certainly change that. And he actually, I was just Googling as you were talking, he updated this rule himself.
He has a number of times. And in 2021, he decided that based on the same 50-50 portfolio, but now he's including more asset classes within that. So not just the limited 2 categories that he had initially, but based on current stock valuations, current interest rates, all of that, he said 4.7% would be the same safe withdrawal rate. So he increased it a bit.
Yeah, but that was in 21.
Yes.
And the bond market did not do so well in 22 or 23, right? So some of those things could change, right? So I think it's, when you're thinking of rules of thumb, in this just general guideline, again, this has been around since the 90s. I talk to advisors all across the country, Liz, like yourself, and a lot of times they say, 4% doesn't necessarily work. It's a lot of times people come back and say maybe it's something more like, 3.2 or something along those lines. Matter of fact, even Suze Orman, who's, obviously a big, financial talking head person, she's got a quote here I'd like to read for you. She says, "It just doesn't work anymore, and I think it's dangerous," says Suze. And she believes it should be lowered to at least 3% and to take the least amount possible out of a retirement account because it's not going to work for everybody. What's your thoughts to that?
I think that Suze is looking at how long people are living. Now, she didn't provide a study to back up her statements. She just said this is what she thinks. And she did say that, people are living longer. People need to be more conservative.
Which is true.
So I think she's approaching it from let's be very, very safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that. I get that. But I do also, in my planning, think that people should look at their own withdrawal rate based on their own situation and determine if possibly they can spend more earlier on. Because if we start out really tamping down what we spend in those first years of retirement, then by the time we realize that we can spend more, maybe we don't have the health to go and do.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we've missed the opportunity to do some things. And so I think that, again, a rule of thumb gives us a starting point, but we need to look at it on our own individual basis to say, well, what can I spend? How much can I spend in the early years and still be safe to carry me through my full retirement? And you have to do some, stress testing and actually put a plan together in order to know what that is for your own situation.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and a lot of times I think rules of thumb are fine for that quick back of the napkin, get a rough, kind of rough it in,
Right.
But then you definitely need to sit down and think about it. Because and go and strategize with your financial professional like yourself, Liz, because you take the $1 million account just for the easy number, and 4%, it's $40,000 a year, right?
Right.
And so that might be fine, but then again, you may need more, you may need less, and depending on the early stages, later
Right.
stages of retirement. So I think you make a great point there. Let's kind of take an opposite stance here. Let's go with Dave
Yes.
Ramsey's take on this, okay? So Dave's in love with the whole 12% thing, by the way. Anyway, he's like constantly talking about accounts that will get you 12%. If you're making 12%, he says, this is the quote, if you're making 12% in good mutual funds and the S&P has averaged 11.8 and inflation for the last 80 years has averaged 4, we know that's not been the case, that leaves you with 8%. Ramsey said to a caller on his radio show, he said, if you want to be a little bit conservative, then 7%, but certainly not 5 or even 3. This just feels, first of all, he's always talking about that 12% mutual fund thing. And I think I know a lot of advisors always push back on that too.
Well, to get the market return, you'd have to be 100% in the market, first off. And
being risky.
I don't have any retirees that are 100% in the market. And then if you're 100% in the market, then you're going to be subject to the volatility of that.
Sure. Yeah.
And what this isn't talking about is the potential for sequence of returns risk. One of the things that I will show people when we're looking at their retirement spending is how that sequence of returns can impact the amount of the distribution. So you can have 2 people have the exact same amount of money. They're both going to average 12% over their retirement years. One person gets bad returns the first 5. The other person gets great returns the first 5.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have a totally different result, because if you're taking money out while you have volatility, then you're actually locking in those down years, and you don't have as much left to bounce back and make up for the, negative return. You don't get that average 12% because you don't have the money there to actually receive those higher years and average out. And so
Right.
when you're in retirement, it's completely different than if you're just saving for retirement.
That's a
And so
great
I
point.
think, I think that, high level view, it sounds like, well, if I can average 12%, I should be able to take, more.
Yeah, 5 or
But
7 or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, but when you look at the volatility, you have to have enough room within the plan to allow for that volatility to happen without blowing up your whole plan.
Yeah, and who's going to be comfortable, to your point a minute ago, being completely all in on the market, especially depending on what your age is. I mean, if you're over 50, probably not. Certainly over 60, definitely, not. You probably don't feel good, stomaching that.
Right. Even my most aggressive clients, and there's everybody has a range of what they prefer.
Sure.
And I have some clients that are very conservative, some that are more moderate, and some that are still pretty aggressive because they have been comfortable with that over their working years. But recently, even one of my most aggressive clients said, should I have more bonds because I'm now X age? And we talked through that and looked at it in their plan based upon their bucket plan and their cash flow and those sorts of things, because that's how I like to look at where should you be invested. But that just, to me, shows you that as we age, we begin to think about preserving. And we don't want to be all in the market.
Absolutely. Well, Morningstar had some interesting research in response to Dave Ramsey there. What's some of that data there?
Yeah, they looked at what he said, actually put together some portfolios that were invested 80% in large cap, 20% small cap, used the real returns from 1926 onward, but had it 100% in the market, okay, which would go along with what Dave Ramsey had said. And they found that 55% of the time, the portfolio did last 30 or more years, but 32% of the time, it didn't make it 20 years. And that's because of that sequence of returns risk that I talked about.
Right.
If you end up with some of those down years, those really bad years in the early part of your distribution, then it can significantly reduce the longevity of that portfolio.
And I don't know about you, but 55% of the time the portfolio lasted 30 years. Okay, great. So basically half the time. I'm not sure if I'm willing to gamble on half, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, we're talking about this safe withdrawal rate. One more here. Dave Blanchett, a PhD, CFA, and a CFP, his quote is, the most advisable initial portfolio withdrawal rate for most retirees may not be 8%, but advisors should be aware that 4% may be too safe given some of the nuances around retirement planning. So he's kind of a little on the higher side as well. What's your thoughts?
He does, and he's put a lot of study into this. He's obviously a very intelligent person, has a lot of research behind what he's saying. And what he's looking at is, let's say that when you retire, you have some flexibility in what you can spend, that you can reduce your spending if, we have a bad year in the market.
Right.
The more flexibility that you have in that spending, then the higher that initial withdrawal rate can be. The longer that you're going to expect to be in retirement, the lower it has to be, versus if you have a shorter period in retirement, then you can increase it. So he's saying, look at your situation. When are you retiring? How many years might you retire? And how much spending flexibility do you have? Can you cut back if we have some bad years? If you don't have any spending flexibility, then you've got to be more conservative so that you certainly have the ability to continue to take that money that you need. But if you have some spending flexibility, then go ahead and take more. And if things don't turn out, quite as good as hoped, then you could cut back for a few years and let the portfolio catch up to itself. And so he has a whole chart. You look how many years you're going to spend, how much flexibility you're going to have. And so for a 30-year retirement that's very conservative, which would go along with the 4% rule, it's assuming that you're always going to take that same amount adjusted for inflation. He's coming in for that 30-year a conservative spending plan at 4.3%. So that's right in line with what all of the other research is saying. But then he's saying, well, if you have some spending flexibility, you could increase that to 5.5% potentially.
Gotcha.
Depending on how much spending flexibility that you have within your plan. And that's something that you would talk through with your advisor to, think through that process. But if you're going to then live longer than 30 years, then you're going to reduce those numbers. And if you might be retiring later and have fewer years, you could actually increase them.
Well, so what I'm taking from this, Liz, it's a sliding scale based on your individual, just like everything. It's based on your individual, situation. So let's kind of just wrap it up with, talking about how you can use or find a safe withdrawal rate for yourself. I guess the rule of thumb gets you in the ballpark, right? But then after that, where do we go?
Well, if you're nearing retirement, you can use that rule of thumb to say, here's a quick estimate of how much I can take from my accounts, and am I in the ballpark of what I'm needing to spend? And if you are further away, you're still saving, it can give you a quick estimate of how much you need to save. Let's say that you're going to use that 4%, then you would need 25 times however much you're going to want to spend. So if you're going to want to spend $100,000 a year from your accounts, you would need $2.5 million. And you would adjust that up and down because you would take into account your Social Security and other sources of cash flow, and you may not need a full 100,000 coming from your accounts. But you would use that quick and easy calculation to say, here's the target that I'm saving for. But you have to remember that all of this safe withdrawal rate, all of this research around how much you can spend is still based on history. Future's going to be different. So you should sit down and look at your own situation and do a plan and stress test it. Look at what age you're going to retire and how long you expect to be in retirement. What types of accounts do you have and how much tax will be coming out of those different accounts, and what tax bracket are you going to be in? How much do you want to spend at different points in time? Because usually retirees start out by spending more and then reduce their spending over time, and then spend more again later in life. And we call that the retiree spending smile, because it starts high, drops down, and goes back up. Right. But none of these safe withdrawal rates take that into account. And so if you really think through how you might spend over different times, you could come up with a higher amount initially, knowing that you're going to drop it down later as you're not traveling and doing as much. And then taking in your legacy goal. Most of these are not aimed at having a certain amount left at the end. It's just you don't run out of money for yourself. So if you do have a legacy goal, then you've got to, take that into account as well and make an adjustment to your initial withdrawal rate for your own plan based on that. And so it's all, in my opinion, comes down to having a good retirement plan before you retire and knowing what your withdrawals can be during your own personal retirement based on your own situation so that you can be on your best path for your retirement.
Yeah, exactly. It's a sliding scale based on a number of factors as usual. And we didn't even really talk about, obviously, the other pieces that go into it. What if you had a pension? What if you had multiple pensions coming in and you don't have to pull as much out? So there's lots of different ways, or therefore you don't need it, I guess, which means you could take larger amounts or lesser amounts. So a lot of things that factor into finding the right withdrawal rate. Well, that's a tongue twister for what you need to do in your retirement journey. And yeah, as Liz said, to get on your best path, you got to get a strategy together. So if you need some help, as always, please make sure you reach out to a qualified professional in your area to have a conversation about what you need to do. And of course, Liz is here to help if you'd like to talk with her. All you got to do is reach out to her online at bestpathadvisors.com. That's bestpathadvisors.com. Lots of good tools, tips, and resources there. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify, or check out our YouTube channel as well. A lot of good stuff you can find under the Good Stuff tab. There's some things there as well as on the podcast page. So if you need some help, reach out to Liz again at bestpathadvisors.com. Liz, thanks for hanging out and breaking down this conversation with us. Always appreciate it.
I do too. Thank you, Mark.
Absolutely.
Have a good week.
You as well. And we'll see you next time right here on Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaker.
The preceding program is sponsored by Best Path Advisors, which is solely responsible for its content. Securities offered through J.W. Cole Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through J.W. Cole Advisors. Best Path Advisors, J.W. Cole Financial, and J.W. Cole Advisors are unaffiliated entities. The opinions expressed by Liz Whitberry should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or investment advice, nor as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Neither J.W. Cole Financial nor its representatives provide legal, tax, or accounting advice. Persons who provide such advice do so in a capacity other than as a registered representative of J.W. Cole. Investing is subject to risks, including the loss of principal. Due to volatility within the markets mentioned, opinions are subject to change without notice. Information is based on sources believed to be reliable, however, their accuracy or completeness cannot be guaranteed.